All right, welcome in Modern Symposium. Finally getting to the topic that we've been kicking down the road for a while in good American politics fashion. But today we're finally here. The education system. My opinion, I'm pretty big on this one. I hate our education system, and I can go on all day about all the things that we need to change about it. Nick, what do you think?
I value a good education, and I value a good educational debate. Looking forward to this one. I know people were going to be mad in the comments if we didn't get to this one. We give the people what they want, right?
Yep. So yeah, I mean, we can actually divide it up into a couple different things here too. I mean, first off, I know everyone might be, all jokes aside, everyone can probably understand the struggles of the college education system. Anyone who's battling with student loans or people who might not have gotten a good return on their investment. I did see a stat earlier today that 45% of people with a college degree are either unemployed or underemployed, meaning that they don't even need a degree to do the job that they're doing, which it seems like a bad practice to take out a loan for something like that, but it also seems like a bad practice for lending companies to give loans to children for something that there doesn't seem to be a good chance of them being able to pay back.
I mean, dude, when we were in high school, it's like, all right, you're getting a college education, essentially. Like there really didn't seem to be many other routes that were really like given. Like you were forced to take on like a loan, essentially, unless you're in the small minority of people whose parents were able to help you pay for it, which most people aren't. The truth of it, if you want to go to college, you have to take out loans, right?
Right, yeah. And that's the thing. If you want to go to college, and it's pretty much normalized as a cultural norm to kind of be a stigma around not going to college. And it's like, oh, if you didn't go to college, everyone's wondering, oh, he must not have made it in or something like that, when realistically, might have been a smarter financial move. I also saw something saying that, if someone were to get out of high school and say, learn a trade, join a union, something like that, and start working right off the bat, versus someone were to go to school to become a doctor and go all the way through college, med school, that 20 years down the line, I think it was 20, at age 40, the plumber's still winning. The plumber's still ahead financially compared to the doctor because they have no loans and they've been getting paid for an extra 12 years. So, by the time they're 40, if all other factors remain the same, plumber is, technically richer than the doctor.
At age 40.
Yeah, at age 40, assuming that they spend the same, and all other factors the same, then the amount of money that the plumber would make, obviously the doctor makes way more, but they also have, I mean, if you go through 8 to 12 years of school, of med school, you're looking at, you're you're $500,000 in debt, probably, at least, I would
Right.
say.
Right. So then I've also heard of doctors, right? It becomes like you have to like spend also more because you're supposed to like have like status essentially, right? So you like spend more just because your like income is higher, but you're still paying, that same like percentage or whatever of your income towards loans.
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense. Spending more, you're in kind of higher circles, gotta try to, might need to, move to an area that's more expensive, that type of thing.
Right.
But I guess a good question then would be, why is it that the system is the way it is, where, for one, why is tuition cost so much? It doesn't seem like it should cost that much. And also, why are we just, I mean, where's this money coming from? Because if there's this many people who are defaulting on student loans or not being able to pay back their student loans, where is that money? That money is basically being printed out of thin air. Once again, same thing as you mentioned earlier, before we started here, you were talking about how it's very similar to the housing bubble of 2008. It's almost exactly the same, at least from what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, right. Having to have so many people get these degrees, it then saturates the market with degrees, essentially, right? If everyone has it, it forced people into getting it, but then it just creates, essentially, if there's not enough jobs to fill all of those roles, then it creates a surplus of need for the demand of, like everyone has a degree, essentially. Like, what is it actually worth having it if everyone has it?
Yeah, right. And what is, I mean, as far as like from the college's perspective, say, it's supply and demand on that side too. It'd be one thing if it was, you actually have to get a loan and pay it back, and if you're, for whatever reason, it'd be up to the private lender to give you the loan, and if they looked at your grades and said, I don't think this person's going to graduate, I'm not going to give them the loan. Or if they said, oh, this person's going into some major that there's not a high job market for, so it's unlikely they'll be able to pay back, then I'm not going to give them the loan. But when the lenders are backed by the government and guaranteed that they will get their money back, they'll give loans to everyone. And so now colleges have no reason not to just keep raising the price, because it's just an infinite supply of people. Like you said, it's normalized. Everyone's got to go to college. Nobody's actually looking at what it costs, because all they got to do is, oh, if I get a loan, I got to go. And it's just understood that it's a wise investment, but it's not all the time. Sometimes it is, but the higher the tuition fees go and the more kind of nonsense, ridiculous majors keep popping out that there's no demand for a job, who, graduated with like some type of ridiculous gender studies major or something like that, then it's just more money being printed and handed right to the colleges.
So colleges then are who's in cahoots here? Colleges are essentially, they have no incentive not to give out the degrees, like you said. They have Big Brother backing them, and that money essentially comes from us via inflation, essentially.
Taxpayer dollars and inflation. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a good point too, that so the whole point of college, I mean, if you were to think about it realistically, what are you paying for? You're not paying for the education, right? Especially nowadays. You can get the education online. I mentioned earlier too that, I mean, I barely use anything that I learned in my college classes for my job. And
Well, right. So that becomes that big part of what we want to go into is how much do you actually use, essentially? How long would it take of focus, online courses, maybe like powered by, AI, whatever, just like decentralized, like access to information, essentially. How long would it take you to learn, especially, dude, like a finance degree, like how to be an investor? I mean,
I mean,
once you learn everything about it, it's like, oh, just buy a index fund is essentially the best way to do it. Buy
well,
a
that's the
buy
thing.
a large diversified portfolio.
So that's the thing too, is that wouldn't even be, you don't even need, I can do that right now for free just on YouTube or by getting a book or something. I mean, back in the day, it was getting books, going to the library now, but it's like a lot of these colleges are posting their classes online for free. Or, I mean, you can look up anything and find a very detailed explanation or a full course on everything that's known about this. And so you're not really paying for the education. I've learned far more stuff on YouTube and from reading books and from doing other things than I did from college. So why are people paying for it? Well, the difference between learning everything about finance through YouTube videos and getting a finance degree is that it's the degree. You're paying for the degree, right? It's you're paying for a piece of paper that says I'm qualified to be hired by a company to do this
Yeah.
job. But the problem becomes there's a misaligned incentive structure, like you just mentioned, which is the colleges are incentivized to give everyone degrees. So they're no longer even the vetting mechanism that they were originally supposed to be.
Right. But so here's an interesting part is you said like something like gender studies degree, or like maybe like a philosophy degree, even something me and you are very much into, wouldn't get, essentially, because, oh, we're not going to get a return on this investment. Wouldn't it be, isn't it a good thing that we still fund, you know, philosophers and,
I mean, good for who?
like society?
Maybe yes for society, but it's not good for the philosopher, because now $100,000 in debt with no way of paying it back.
It's a good point. Philosophers are never too rich as well. That kind of
And
that kind of goes along with the territory.
but don't get me wrong, like I agree with you that yes, we do need those there's a lot of, majors that might not be high demand in the job market, but they are important for society. But I think that they're hurt by this too, because of the way that the system is, tuition keeps rising exponentially. And so someone who might have paid a couple $1,000s back in like the 70s to get a degree in philosophy is now having to pay $100,000 for that
Yeah.
degree when, normally it wouldn't have costed that much to begin with if it weren't for these unlimited loans that are coming in that are government backed, guaranteed to be repaid to the lender. And so there's no accountability to anyone except for the 18-year-old kid who has no idea what he's doing and just says, "Oh, I really like philosophy. I'm going to do that." And then, here you are 20 years later and trying to figure out how the hell you're going to pay it back, or you're going to default, or whatever the situation is.
Even like those degrees, like a lot of, like literature degrees and things like that, those can all be very easily like made online courses, right?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think pretty much everything can be, unless it's anything that could be taught in a classroom could be taught online. If it's something where it's kind of, like physical in nature, you might not be able to learn how to weld online. You
Right.
probably got to get out
Right.
and
Or
practice it. But
perform heart surgery.
yeah, right, yeah.
It's-
Yeah, right. If it's like something in a lab or something. But for the most part, I mean, there's a lot of what you learn in the classroom could be, I mean, it is taught online, and there is websites and platforms like Coursera and LinkedIn Learning and those type of things where they do have these courses where you can pay not that much money. I mean, you could pay, like, I think it's like $300 to get a certificate in coding Python. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty high demand skill. It would cost you, $50,000 to get it out of college, but you can get the same thing online, and the companies don't care. The companies are hiring these people if they have that certificate from Coursera. A lot of the times, the companies are the ones that made and designed the class that they upload onto Coursera. That way, they
yeah,
can
right.
teach what they want to teach.
We want you to be able to do this,
Right? Yeah, and
right?
that's part of it too.
Because like we were saying, how much of your job is what you learned in college? Like not fun,
Not much.
right? Everyone, like once you get your job, you then have your onboarding process, right? This is what we actually do at our company, essentially, right? And you have to learn those tasks for that company. Now, those tasks are like what you learned in college, right? Like the basic ins and out, but then you just learn their version of it, essentially.
Right, yeah, and a lot of the stuff you learn in college too that's not even the skills that matter really, when it gets to depending on what your job is, but there's plenty of other skills where, I mean, I know for sure that there's companies who are doing this and they almost prefer to recruit people from these online platforms where they got a say in what the curriculum was, because that's another part of it too, is we're dealing with brick and mortar, like physical facilities on these campuses, and it, when I was in college, we were still going to the library and taking out textbooks and stuff. And it's like they can't update the curriculum fast enough to keep up with the technology, specifically in the tech sector. If you're going to work for Facebook, well, I mean, I guarantee you the things that are the cutting edge at Facebook or Google or Amazon are not things that are in this 10-year-old textbook that they're teaching you at a traditional college.
Right. Exactly. I kind of want to bring up right here. Um, have you been like seeing online like what like Musk is on about right now?
No, I haven't really. Not recently, at least.
So him and Vivek are currently in favor of a certain type of visa, right, for education, essentially like a certain type of working visa for like high skilled people. Some people on the right are kind of mad because like they're saying, oh, you're bringing like foreign people in for American jobs, and it's just an interesting clash on the right now between like like the Elon Vivek side and like the like traditional like MAGA guys. It's like the tech bros versus old crew.
Yeah, I did. I think I did see a little bit about that. I saw that they're calling them someone the woke right. I don't know which side they were calling the woke right, or if that's something different. But yeah, I
And
did see
it's
there's a little bit
the
of a
woke
civil war
right.
going on there. But I mean, I agree. I mean, the same problem we talked about. Uh, you know, it transgresses right and left, where it's like, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, pretty close in age. All the Republicans, Democrats, it's like the old guard is getting replaced by these new guys who actually understand tech and understand the world that we live in, and they can see. I mean, I'm on the side of Elon and Vivek on that one, I think, because I feel like these are guys that can
No,
see
yeah,
these.
no, I am too. I mean, I support immigration, and too, like you try to recruit the best and brightest minds. I don't know. There's some I was seeing people saying they, like want to essentially like bring people over here to like force them to work for the company because they can terminate their visas or whatever, essentially.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and that applies to so much where there's, I mean, we're still using systems that we were using 40 years ago in a world that is entirely different. And I think that, I mean, I think education is the major one. I mean, we're having a conversation right now. We're not in the same room. I mean, even like COVID set a great example that it can be done online. But here's the thing is, if I'm a teacher and I teach the same class 8 times a day, rather than doing that, I can make a video of myself teaching the class, have some practice problems, and then hold like a 2 or 3 hour a day session where people can come and ask me questions and I didn't understand this part of the curriculum, whatever it is. It just seems like it's so much more efficient. And then, that same teacher can also not only teach 30 kids, they could teach 1,000 kids. It seems so obvious, but it doesn't. I don't know what the
Like,
holdup is, I guess.
no, right. But like, does it not seem like right now we are on like cusp of like having free knowledge? Like
Yeah, I mean, we are.
we pretty much do for the most part. I mean, pick up your phone, right? And you have basically all of the world and knowledge at your fingertips. Like I think we could be in like the golden age of education somehow.
I think we are
But
coming up on it.
like like we could be, and yet how is our current system so bad?
I think it's the colleges that don't want to.
It's
The colleges are kind of the old guard in this sense, where they're still
yeah.
operating. Same thing with the media. I would say about the media, it's kind of the same thing where they're still operating under the illusion that they're providing value, but they're not. They're not providing any value to the student in most cases that they couldn't get
So
from a better from a.
one of, if not the, probably the biggest thing of getting that 4 year college degree is that, you is the networking. You go out in the prime years of your life and you typically like live away from home, essentially, in most people's cases. And, you spend a ton of time with brand new people, you make connections. And that's how a lot of people end up getting their employment is the people you meet while you're there. Not so, not so much like, oh, I have this piece of paper which says I'm qualified, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, and that would be the obstacle getting in the way of actually replacing colleges. I think, at least as we know it, but I don't think that you know, getting to meet new people and live on the same campus is worth the amount of money that they're charging. I think that the price of the tuition is just, it far outweighs the value you get from it. And it used to be a combination of both, and now it's only that. And so the value, I guess, the value of the degree has gone down. The value of the actual degree has gone down a lot. The value of the college experience has gone down a lot, but there's still something there for that networking part of it. But the college experience used to be the networking plus the education from the best teachers with the biggest library of resources, and it's like the only place you can learn how to do this, and now that part is totally gone, and all that remains is this networking portion of it, which is valuable, but I mean, realistically, if the value has gone down, the price should be going down, but it's getting higher and higher, and it seems like a bubble.
Do you think you're ready after high school to like quote unquote like enter the real world? Like what age do you like do
Just
you
as
think
far as
people should be
the
like all right, so here's what I'm thinking, right? If the important part is like going out and meeting people essentially, could you not have just certain like college towns essentially, like you set up apartments that's like has like bars and shit surrounding and like typical like college amenities like tennis courts, whatever, and have like these communities for young people essentially while you're getting like an online education.
Yeah. I mean, keep the college towns. Get rid of the actual. Get rid of the actual. The college program. That I mean, could that be where we're going? I could see that. I could see that
Right?
being where we're going. And then those towns would kind of be more like recruitment towns. Whereas, like, okay, say a tech company makes their own online curriculum, and that's what based on your grades on this, we'll get you a job, and then everyone knows like, oh, well, they always go down to those towns to like get to meet future employees. So that's kind of what it is. It depends. It's no longer the place for education. Now it's just the place for networking and recruitment. But that brings up another thing too, is if it's all online, and because at that point it would just be data, which I think it could be a good thing when it comes to job recruitment, where it's like, okay, I'm going to design a class, and I can get into another thing on this, but it'd be
How
based on your
deep does
data.
it? Yeah, how deep does this rabbit hole go essentially? Like if essentially all information is like given to people, like everyone can obtain this if you pass like this test essentially, right? And like the government and people businesses agree like your aptitude for this test makes you capable to complete this job, right? Would that be moving towards just then a pure meritocratic essentially like you have to get this percentage score to like qualifies for like this position essentially, and would that be a good thing
I think yes,
for a society?
that's exactly where I think it's going. I've been thinking about this a lot. Been talking to people at my company about it too, and I think this is where it's going because it makes perfect sense because it's a win-win for both sides. It's a win for the company that's hiring because most of the time they're not going to get the best. They're going to get someone who was recommended by someone else they went to college with, and then once they get them on board, they got to train them up so if picture this, you've got a platform similar to Facebook, except it's for online learning. And they can use, because Facebook's free. Facebook's free for us to use because they're taking our data and they're selling it to advertisers. Now replace the advertisers with companies who are paying for access to the students' data, and us as users or students, we can go on. We don't have to pay extra, so we'll have, we'll be very flexible in which, oh, maybe I'm into engineering. I take a couple classes there, but I also want to check out philosophy, and I can do all these classes for free or close to free, and then I could take all the tests, all the assessments. I'm not paying anything. The company still makes money, the platform, because the companies who are trying to recruit new employees and students will pay for access to their performance data on their assessments, on their tests. I think that's where it's going. I think that makes perfect sense. I think it's a win-win for everyone. It takes the social media model that everyone hates, but it puts it onto something that everyone would like. I think, if you're going to, if you're going to get a higher education, you want people to see your data. You want people to see your scores.
So companies sharing information between each other and deciding our fates for us is the way to go.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Say, my company runs the platform that has all of the online courses on there. And then, if Facebook wants to see who did the best at this course that they put up there or that they really like, then they just pay a subscription so that they can see. So, yeah, say they post their own courses, they just have to pay a subscription and then they can see how everyone did in the course. And so that way they can make sure they get the best students. And it doesn't have to be the best student who was able to afford college or who wanted to take out a loan. It was the best. It's practical. It's free or close to free. Everyone can do it. I mean, there's been cases like this. It was in Stanford. I think it was a while ago in like 2012 or 14 maybe, where they decided someone was given a class about I think it was, I don't know what it was about. It was something about, might have been artificial intelligence or something. And they decided to just live stream it. Like, I can't remember the exact stats. I have them on here. I could pull them up. But there was like hundreds of thousands of people who joined the live stream and watched. And then there was a large group of people who did better on the test who didn't actually go to the college. They watched it online, took the test online, and they did better than the actual like physics graduates or coding graduates, whoever was actually taking it. It was like a grad school class. It was pretty impressive stat.
Yeah, I mean that seems pretty accurate. It's what the part of that an important part of college, is essentially that time management more so than like the actual information that you learn. But where would you learn, some of those like social bonding skills essentially if you don't have, that traditional college timeline?
Yeah, I mean that is probably where the value lies with college right now is the social aspect of it. But I think there's so many alternatives to paying $100,000 and going to a college. I mean, it, would you not be able to get the same networking skills if you didn't attend the college, but you just paid for an apartment or a dorm room on campus?
Right.
Like with the actual thing you're paying for is the classes, but that's not even where the value's at.
And back to your point about Facebook, maybe like social media is maybe selling our data to companies. Does that not sound somewhat dystopian to you?
In the sense that if it were your performance on classes or just in general.
The fact that, yeah, like your performance, like they are essentially like guiding people's paths. They are deciding people's futures and jobs. Does that not sound like a sci-fi novel in the bad way?
I don't see it not in a bad way, I don't think, because what are they doing now? Like, why are you going to
Right now,
begin with? You're going
right now
there
they're
you're going there to try to do well. Like right now, you go to college, you take a test, or you take a bunch of tests and do a bunch of homework and take a final, and then you get a grade back that you can then show to companies and say, look what I did. Here are my grades. Here is my data on how I did in these classes. That's the whole purpose of them now. It would just be more data, better data, more efficient, and I mean, would you rather have not had you have taken out a $50,000 loan in order to show that I passed? Right now, companies can see whether you passed or failed a class, and maybe if you got an A, B, or
right,
C.
right.
Whereas it would be a much more efficient way where recruiting would be better. It'd be more competitive probably for high up positions, but it would be free. So, or it wouldn't, you don't have to worry about paying all this money or taking out loans for all this money and then not getting the job. It's like, okay, if I don't get the job because I didn't perform that well, I'm going to do it again and see if I can do better this time and get to that threshold that they would need. And it would be transparent too. Like we all use Facebook and or Instagram or whatever, and we know that it's free because they're using our data. I think it's much more dystopian that there was a time, or that there still probably is a lot of people who don't know that that's what's happening because they make it kind of hidden. The whole point of this one would be like, yeah, you do it on here, and then the whole point of taking online classes, that's the problem with
You,
learning on YouTube.
you did definitely give me with the taking the grades to future employers and saying this is what I did. That is currently how it works. But keep going though, sir.
Well, that would just be the fundamental difference between what we have on YouTube now and colleges versus where now we go on YouTube and you can learn a bunch of stuff on YouTube. Except, if I go on YouTube right now and I try to learn how to code, then I go to apply as a programmer at Google and they say, what's your qualifications? And I say, well, I watched a lot of YouTube videos, so I know how to code. And they're going to say, we have no way of knowing that because we don't have any data showing us that you actually know how to code. That's the difference between YouTube and say this hypothetical situation where it would be like the same as watching YouTube and then taking some online tests, except that there's actual verification that you did well on this, so now you can get a job.
So who should set the standards for education in theory, in all theory?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm not opposed to the idea of the companies setting their own standards. If the problem is that a tech company is one thing, but most companies, like a construction company or something like that, or a small company who actually only has the amount of employees that they need to keep the lights on and keep the ball rolling. Yeah, I mean, if they're tasked with creating their own curriculum, they're going to have to rely on bigger companies to design the curriculum. Bigger companies then have a bit of a kind of a moat or an advantage over small companies. That could be a problem. Although I wouldn't see any reason why the company who designs the curriculum wouldn't want, I mean, a small company can still recruit from there.
A small company could still use their model.
Yeah, they could still use
Yeah.
their a small company can still see how the students did on the bigger company's curriculum that they designed. And eventually you might have companies who become like their reputation is so good, whereas all of the other companies know like, oh, if these kids took that class, then they come out knowing what they're doing, then, eventually there might be like a standard. There might be, oh yeah, that's the gold standard of
Right.
classes.
Yeah, right. I was thinking like several like distinct like groups of different like classes being formed, something like, oh, if you want like to go into like a tech job, like you get like this like coding and like whatever like type of degree. And then if you want to go into like any like agricultural, like like biology side of things, like there'd be like one set stand. But then
Yeah.
but then who makes that, I guess? And that was the original question. Like the companies? I mean,
What do you mean? Like who makes the classes?
yeah, who makes those classes then?
Yeah, it could be the companies, or it could just be, I mean, there could be a company that makes the classes. That's what they do. They're but that the difference would be that the companies would be a lot. They would have their incentive would be aligned with the incentive of everyone else playing. They would have to, if they wanted to build up their reputation, they would have to actually provide good, efficient assessments and quality information. They'd have to keep it up with the times as new technology comes. They have to keep updating their systems, and it'd be forced then to actually abide by, they'd have to serve the students. It's like they would work for the students in that case. Their job is to try to recruit as many students to take their class and make as many students as successful as they can, because that would only help their company. That would be their incentive. Right now, it's like there's no incentive other than to just have someone attend. How well they do doesn't matter. They keep lowering the standards because, like we said, if people aren't paying for the education, they're paying for the degrees. So if it's hard to get a degree, then I might not pay. And so they got to keep lowering the standards so that more and more people can pass, so that they can recruit more and more people. And I think that's a problem that's spreading out through, it's just rippling throughout all of society too. Because I mean, we talked about it before. That trickles down into lower education, where standards just continue to get lower and lower, and it's all because of this misaligned incentive structure.
I see horror stories on TikTok about like teachers essentially just saying like it's so hard to like teach kids essentially. Like they essentially like everyone has to pass, and the amount of like parent influence is just like crazy these days. Like kids like aren't allowed to fail essentially.
Yeah, I've heard some about that. And there was actually it was in the book Freakonomics. It talked about when the No Child Left Behind policy became a thing, that they one of the parts of it was that they would give teachers bonuses based on how well their students did on these standardized tests. And I thought that was a good idea. That sounds like a great idea. Teachers should be incentivized to help their students do better. That should be, makes common sense.
But
Except
you
then
teach the test.
they literally started, they caught a bunch of teachers who were just writing the answers on the board and then handing out the test.
Oh,
And then it was like, so it's like, oh my God, even the teachers are just taking advantage of this nonsense.
well, that's just corruption. I mean, that's just
Yeah,
like
right. I
that's
mean,
that's
the
probably
idea
just
was there.
a couple bad teachers. I don't know. Like well, you say
I mean, yeah,
their pay was based around.
they would get like a bonus
Yeah.
if I'm remembering correctly. But I mean, elementary school and high
But
school. That's a whole nother system too, which I mean, that one's flawed as well. But obviously, that's part of it, as teachers don't get paid
seems like
very
you
much.
shouldn't have been able to give the teacher the answers to those standardized tests.
Yeah, true. That might have solved it actually if they just didn't have it. But yeah, when it comes to like things like that, it's like, all right, there is something there where teaching is a very important job, and the fact that a teacher doesn't make as much money as they should is probably part of the problem. Because it's like, if you want to recruit the best teachers for high school, say, or even elementary school, I mean, if you want to get people who are super hardworking, super intelligent, actually care about their job.
Passionate, driven, hardworking, intelligent, good, hardworking people, right?
Yeah, right. But it's going to be tough to recruit those type of people when you're only paying like whatever they make, not much. So yes, you might get a lot of those type of people, but then you're going to get some people who are just writing the answers on the board, and hoping to get the bonus. And so that's part of the problem too.
I should they make more than you're saying?
I think so, but then the mechanism of doing that is what, that's what the problem is like, yeah, I think everyone should make more, but I mean,
Right.
it doesn't grow on trees.
It's all centralized too, because then it's just like all teachers make more money, right? Not just like the best, highest performing teachers, right? Or the people who are teaching the right things, who have, the right ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no real like the one thing about, teaching and being in the public sector is that there is no, it's tough to have like metrics, whereas, like at a lot of, say you're a salesman, it's like you get paid based on your sales. So if my sales go up, I'm getting paid more. That's like a good incentive structure. It incentivizes you to do what's best for your company, and you get a piece of the pie. But with teaching, it's not that easy. It doesn't seem like, it's like, can you pay teachers based on how well their students do? Well, that seems good, but then you've got that situation. But I think overall
Right.
that is a good idea if they could just, maybe throw a few extra precautions in there so that that's not happening.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking, I was just laughing in my head thinking about, we said, what if we don't give the teachers the answers to the tests? Well, that probably won't work for like third grade teachers who can probably pretty easily pass the
Yeah.
standardized tests for a third grader.
Yeah, well, I guess the fundamental problem there is then it's like, yeah, so say we want to pay teachers more for doing a better job. Well, then how do you define a better job? More of your students pass. So then you're just going to pay whatever teacher makes their class the easiest to
What?
pass.
All
That's
right.
not doing them any good either.
Here's some philosophy. What is a good teacher? What makes a good teacher?
Right. And I think it's a lot of things that aren't necessarily quantifiable. Like
Right,
how do you
exactly. Like,
quantify how much this teacher tries to like, help out the kid who struggles more than the
dude,
others.
right? Like whoever your favorite teacher is, they're probably not your favorite teacher because they statistically more of their students pass their test, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
They're
exactly.
probably your
Yeah.
favorite
They're
teacher
better
because
mentors,
they
better leaders.
they stuck out for you one time, right? Or like they're just really nice to you, or
Right.
you have like more of a relationship with them than any other ones, right? Like my basketball coach, right, in high school, he's one of my favorite teachers because I had 4 years of basketball with him, right?
Yeah. And some teachers are passionate about what they teach, and that trickles down to their students. They're fired up. They kind of inspire you to learn. Other teachers are just there to read you the notes and then answer any questions. And so, but that's not really quantifiable. And especially now too, when you think about it, because it's like, okay, we talked about this before where, remember when teachers used to say, well, you can't use a calculator on the test because you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket for the rest of your life. And so
And,
you're going to need to know how to do it without one. And now here we are walking around with calculators in our pockets.
but I still
And
think mental math is an important skill to teach.
it's definitely important to understand how it works. Right. Yeah, it's still good. But with the calculator, with the invention of the calculator, learning is now a little bit different because it's not so much about like memorizing a bunch of math,
Right. Right.
or even with like the invention of the internet, it's not so much about like memorize. Like at my job, there's a bunch of things that probably back in the day people would have had to memorize, but it's just like long lists of, prices and how much this costs and this costs. Where I don't have it all memorized, but I don't need to because I could just look that up. I just need to know what I need. And whatever it is, I can look it up. Okay, that costs that. I can put it in. Now with AI, with ChatGPT, all of the what used to be when I was in college, we had a lot of math classes and it was show your work. It was like there was no way to just Google the answer.
Right.
And now you totally can. And so the question becomes like what is now important to learn if most of these things, essays can be written by ChatGPT, long math problems can be done by ChatGPT. I don't think that there's no point in learning anymore, but I think there's got to be a different way of learning that can help people to use ChatGPT as a tool to better themselves rather than just using it as a crutch so that they don't have to do anything.
So you don't have to like memorize your timetables anymore, right? Like that's a thing of the past, right? Like I don't think those will. Are those still in classrooms? They might be.
Not sure, actually.
They probably still are. See, I think I might defend even having those in there still, though, because
I
just
would too.
the mechanism of doing that math by hand is fundamentally understanding math, right? I
Right.
think that
Yeah.
is a
No,
very
yeah.
important intrinsic skill.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. But I'm talking more, math is kind of a bad example, but I'm talking more along the lines of like when we learned history, it was a lot of like, at least in elementary school and high school, and even a little bit in college, it was a lot of like memorizing dates and stuff like that, and memorizing names and wars and events. Whereas it wasn't so much about, we could like the problem on a test might be which year did Christopher Columbus sail the ocean blue? It's like, oh, I know that
Hmm.
one, 1492. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't, should it be more about like, okay, why? Like why did he
Oh,
do
oh,
that? It's
well,
like,
well, well, absolutely. It absolutely has to be, right?
right, yeah, and I think with ChatGPT now, like everything to do with memorization kind of goes out the window, and now it's more along the lines of like critical thinking, where it's like, okay, yeah, you can kind of connect things together. It's all about knowing the right questions to ask now. I think it should be
Hmm.
at least.
Kind of wanted to talk about the history education, like you were saying, like what we learned about, like that's an incredibly interesting one to me. Is like like how history is taught in different countries, like that's pretty fucking interesting to me. Like like how we learn about the American Revolution, it's like holy shit, it's like the most important thing that basically ever happened, right? And like how like everyone else learns about it is like, oh yeah, and then like Britain like let go of the colonies then essentially, right?
Yeah, it's like not for in Britain, isn't it? Just it's like a side. Oh yeah, and by the way, in that year they got, and then it's not
Or
a.
or
There's probably not even a full chapter on it.
or how about this? Like when you learn like world history, you learn like European history
Yeah,
essentially. It
yeah, right.
like how much like ancient Chinese history did we learn? Like none at all.
No, I've never learned much about like anything Eastern Europe or
African.
farther east. Yeah, African, nothing. It was pretty much just Europe. I mean, a little bit after college, just for entertainment almost, or just as like a hobby. I read a little bit about some other places, but I mean, the actual school system, yeah, world history isn't
Well,
not really world history. It's like Western history.
dude, world history. It's basically you start in what like ancient Sumer essentially, and you do like Sumer, like Mesopotamia, in, like a couple days maybe, and then straight from there you do Egypt for maybe a couple days, and then it's Rome, and then it's Greece, Rome for like the rest of the semester,
Mhm.
and like that's it. And then
Yeah, and
and
I
then it's
I
hilarious, and then it's hilarious. You don't even really learn like even more than that. Like you don't learn like like Middle Ages history that much in high school. Like War of the Roses and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know much about that at all, but that is a point. I remember being in high school and all through school, and I think this is a big deal too, because it wasn't until later on that I kind of understood why we were learning this stuff. Like we kind of we've had this come up a few times, and I've had it come up with a few other people where it's like, there we go. At work one time, I was trying to figure out something, and it was like, oh wait, I did learn this in school. Didn't even make that connection that this was what it was for. And same with history, where it's like I remember thinking probably in high school, yeah, history is probably not that important because, I'm going to go in to be an engineer. So like this doesn't have anything to do with my life at all. This is just like random facts I have to learn. But realistically, there's a purpose of learning it. And it's because history repeats itself, and you can see what happened when we gave some people absolute power, and that happened over and over and over again. So we know that's probably a bad idea. And eventually, and you can see every time there's new technology that comes out, there tends to be some conflict. You can kind of see that,
And
and it's supposed
right,
to prepare you. But I feel like we're
yeah,
taught all these things as if they are set in stone. In fact, specifically when it comes to ideas like physics
science,
and
yeah,
sciences, where we're not taught we're taught this is what it is, memorize it, instead of this is what we know so far, but what do you think? We might be wrong, which I think would be much more inspiring to students if they were able to think about it that way. Because then it's fun. Then it's kind of like a game. Like, oh, I bet I can maybe think of something that nobody else thought of before. Something like that.
Oh, dude, have you seen those studies where they'll have groups of adults trying to put together, like, I forget what it is. It's some kind of like puzzle, maybe like a Lego set, or maybe like just like a ED like puzzle, or it, it's a freestanding structure. That's what it is, right? It's that thing where like you have matches and like matches to form like a freestanding structure of like just matches or
Yeah, it's
something
kind of like
like
a
that,
Jenga
right?
tower, basically, almost.
Yeah, something like that. It's like you have to like balance, but you have to do like teamwork, right? Kids do better than adults at that test because kids like go about the problem completely differently than adults do.
Well, they
So
just
the
think
way,
outside the box.
yeah. So here's the two different approaches. Well, I'll start with adults because that's the one like we understand more because we're adults in heaven, right? Not like small kids. All right. So adults, as soon as like the time starts, like they start like going into like specific roles, right? Like one person like tries to become like the leader, right? And starts like dictating things, and like one person like becomes like the assistant, right? Like other people like fall in or like start, it's like immediately like power dynamics start within the group, right? As soon as that starts, like that happens, and they like set in stone plans, but these plans start to like fail, right? Most of the time because they like do one thing, they try and do it, and then it fails. Kids, on the other hand, how kids approach it, they just start fucking building something, right? And they start like building it. They see what works, they see what doesn't work, right? So their tower would fall, and they'd be like, all right, that doesn't work. We have to build the tower a different way. They're not fucking like worrying about like power dynamics, shit like that. They're like cooperating, and they will like, and they like build higher structures because
Yeah,
like adults
that's interesting.
like
No, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. They definitely the having the I feel like the education system now just kills the creative mind kind of because it tells you everything is this is what it is rather than
right,
like you see have you ever heard of like Montessori schools?
yeah, are
I
are
never
one
really knew about those before until recently. I was like looking at them. Those seem pretty cool. A lot of like some of the most successful people in the world
Hart
all
went to
went to
one.
Montessori. Did he?
Yeah, the certified One Piece card specialist,
It's
the
based
card game.
it's basically just like the difference is they kind of let you go down your own path rather than having you, all right, sit down. Now we're gonna do social studies. They kind of like let you decide what you're interested in, or
I don't know. I haven't looked up, like curriculum in Montessori schools, but like I was actually looking up, like what's the term? Like non-sectarian private schools, I believe is the term. What that
was
means
that
is not religious private schools,
okay?
right?
Yeah.
So like Montessori schools are like the biggest ones, right? Like those schools that aren't in like the public school system, but like aren't a religious institution essentially. And that's kind of like what you were asking about, like, oh, is it like more like I think it's like more like interactive,
Hmm.
it's like less
Makes sense.
less Prussian model, more a little more modern maybe.
Yeah, right. Well, speaking of the Prussian model too, I don't know if we touched on that, but I was just looking at it again and kind of seeing and two things that I think were pretty important because they're really bad is that what's basically our entire education system at least you know kindergarten through high school is based on this Prussian model from the 1800s, and the Prussian model was designed to make obedient soldiers during wars, and it's all about obedience rather than like creativity and curiosity. And that's why we have, set periods, the alarm bell goes off, you move to the other one. And that's why they have kids all grouped together based on their age rather than their abilities, which that slows down the kids who are, gifted and could probably go further. And it also gives the kids who need extra help a harder time. And it's not really good for anyone. And then on top of that, everyone's take bounces back and forth from history to math to English instead of just, let's just focus in on this one thing that you're actually interested in and passionate about and that you could be really good at, which is I think what they do in Montessori schools, or at least in some schools that I've came across articles about. But I feel like that would be so much better, because then people would actually be driven. People would be going to school and doing what they're passionate about rather than going to school and hating their lives and just wanting to pass the test.
Right. And having what, like two periods that you actually like going to because you're interested in one subject and you like the teacher in the other class, and then
Hmm.
everything else is just like, oh, this is super dumb.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you're just at that point, it's just like you're just kind of like a cog in a machine, whereas it stifles your creativity and your drive. And then by the time you're out of there,
Is
your
is
whole
that
brain has been changed.
is that absolutely the reason why education hasn't been changed?
What do you think? What do you mean?
I think you know where I'm going with this. As like the government is doesn't
They
want
want
to
it like
change
that?
doesn't want our education system to change because they want like take Prussian soldiers and institute them with, American workers.
Yeah. No, I think that
American
makes,
workers as opposed to American free thinkers.
yeah. No, I definitely think that makes a lot of sense because I know like Rockefeller was a big, um, he was like a big advocate for the Prussian model because for that exact reason, because he had so many employees that he was running out of people who knew how to, you know, work on the steel mill. And so he was running out of people who were disciplined enough to show up on time and stay for the day and leave. And so he donated a lot of money to kind of keep it that way because that was what he needed was workers. And that's exactly what the current school system designs their students to be is just obedient workers, which yes, I do think that was intentional when it was created. And whether it's still intentional, the reason we haven't gotten rid of it is probably still the same reason. Yeah, I would say
Yeah,
so.
do you think that's still intentional by them, or do you think that's just kind of like, well, it's pretty good, and we are like the strongest country, and why should we fuck with it? Because are a pretty conservative nation, you know? Like,
Yeah. I mean, it might not be as
it might just
malicious.
be, bureaucratic,
I
like
think it's a lot of bureaucratic because we also are in a
bullshit,
different time where,
as opposed to, again, a sort of grand cabal of like, oh yeah, let's keep Americans down, let's keep them dumb, like that.
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely
Or is
don't
it
think it's the
just,
grand
you're right.
cabal. I definitely don't think it's the grand cabal, but I do think it is kind of I think that, I mean, that's a good question. Do the institutions and the people in power need more obedient people, or do they need more creative thinkers? And I think it will always
They
be
need
obedient.
they need obedient people, right?
Too
They
many
don't
creative
they don't
thinkers is a
really
problem.
they don't want thinkers in the
Right. Yeah, I
masses.
think that makes a lot of sense. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so if that is the case, does it ever change? And if it, because I think, I mean, I do think though that we reach a point that if it doesn't change, the other countries who do change it will overtake us
Oh
because
yeah.
education is the foundation of everything else. Military, innovation, technology. It's just education is the foundation that builds a prosperous society. And if continues to remain broken because no one wants to fix it for that reason, do we end up collapsing in a heap because we can't function anymore because we haven't kept up with a country like China or something like that who has actually innovated their education system to benefit their society. And in order to benefit society, you have to benefit the people too,
I mean, Richie, what happens to the American economy when we are not the reserve currency?
Right. I mean, yes, and that's not too
That's
far
not that's
fetched.
not that's not a pretty thing at all. That's right. That's not a completely far fetched, like, crazy theory, right? That's a thing that could happen.
Also, what about when AI starts taking over, pretty, I wouldn't want to say simple, but pretty unskilled tasks, truck driving, cashier already, but, stuff like that. And it puts all of these people out of work. And now they need to have some level of critical thinking skills in order to learn a new skill. But the education systems that we have aren't designed to teach them that. They're designed to keep them obedient, and like that could cause a whole lot of problems when we don't have enough people who understand the AI to be able to work the AI, you know?
Right. I mean, some these talks always come down to AI somehow.
Yeah, I mean
It's
it's always on the in the back of the mind, but I think for
it's
this one it is
it's
important because when we're
always in our
talking,
head. I
I mean,
mean,
even just to loop it back around to the online
artificial
platforms.
intelligence,
Yeah,
education,
right.
intelligence, right?
I mean, to loop it back around to like the online learning platforms, I think that's another. See, I'm a big advocate for. I'm tossed investments into companies like Coursera, so full disclosure. But one of the other reasons that made me think this was because if there are a lot of jobs that become automated in the near future, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to have to learn a new skill, and they're not going to go back to a traditional college and pay another 50 grand to do it. They're going to need to learn it online, and there's going to need to be some type of platform or some type of system to give them some type of credit or qualification to show that they know how to do it, so that way they can use that to go get another job. I think that's
Mm.
coming quicker than we think. quicker than we're anticipating.
I mean, that would completely throw our education system into a loop, right?
I hope it does. I've been waiting on this. I mean, these guys, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, these guys got to make this happen because the education system that we currently have is, I think it's the biggest problem we have. Because think about this too. I mean, the economy. Everyone's worried about the economy. Oh, the economy's so bad. Inflation is so bad. And it's like, yeah, that's because everyone who comes out of high school is taking out all of these loans. And then when they start working, they're not putting their money into the economy. They're using it to pay back the loans. If they stop doing that, our economy goes up as well. It's good for the I mean, it'd be good for everything, I think. I don't see a downside.
I mean, that and that, and, you don't lose money through taxes and inflation.
I mean, that would be the
Like,
best thing for the economy that I can think of. I think that's the number one thing holding down the economy is that no one can spend the money they earn because they have to pay back their loans. And they don't need to, I mean, it doesn't cost that much, but we're talking real cost. It's not that much. They're just making it up.
it's just completely bloated, essentially. Like all colleges, essentially, like basically. But again,
Yeah, I mean, realistically,
it's the experience that there. Like that's what it has to come back to, though. It's like it's not just gaining knowledge to become an engineer, right? It's at 18 years old. Okay, so you're 18, high school, get out of high school, right? Then you can learn how to be an engineer in 1 year, say it takes. To become an engineer at 19.
well, maybe if I do the online courses and I can, then maybe I would do that and then spend the next 3 years getting a bunch of other online degrees. And I could do that because they're affordable. I mean, realistically, yeah, the experience, I agree, but the experience is a different thing. I mean, you can get the experience without, like, I currently live in an area that's mostly people in their 20s, and there's bars, and it's kind of a very similar area to the college campus. And it's like, you
All
can
right.
get a apartment on a college campus and not take out a $60,000 loan to get the degree,
I wanted to bring this up earlier, and we naturally moved past it. But so you were just talking about moving to a nice, like, densely populated area, right? And getting that sort of college like experience. The fucking reason why everyone loves college so much, it's because it's most people's only time in their lives where they live in an actual walkable city.
That is probably a big part of it. Yep.
That close knit, like you walk over to your
Yeah,
friend's house, walk over to class, walk over to the grocery store, right? And like that actual like community and like walkability is like a big part of like how cities like should be structured, but our cities are completely structured around automobiles. Like there's
Mhm.
like parking lots take up so much goddamn space. I know this isn't about education, but I just want to say fuck our need for like cars and fucking up our walkable cities.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Walkable city with a community of people that it's like all around your age, and you can find people with similar interests, form lifelong friendships. That is definitely a huge part of it, but that is not education. That's a different thing, and you can get one without the other. But yes, I do agree. I mean, I can see us moving that way. I saw something, this was also Elon. He was giving his presentation about the self-driving cars, the robo-taxis, and in it he was showing some examples of what the infrastructure would have to look like or what it could look like. And because there's not nearly as much of a need for parking lots anymore, they would be able to, turn all that into like green space or, something better than something useful or better than a parking lot. Because, if right now at, say the United Center, there's like, an acre or whatever, a parking lot. You don't need that.
Take a nice big vehicle, make it electric, right? Have it run through those like dense city areas, right? And they can have fit a lot of people on them, and they'll be fully electric and super cheap.
Oh, the bus, like a
And
bus.
yeah, I'm describing a fucking electric train, which we had in the 1980s
Okay.
in our fucking cities until like big automobile like destroyed that.
Yeah, so that's a good. I never really knew why they don't. I mean, I took a class actually about them, and I know they have them in other countries, and I know that they're doable and they're pretty efficient. And I've always kind of wondered why we don't have those. but I don't know. I don't know the background of it. I'm sure it has something to do with big automobile or big bus or something.
Well, it could be big bus. Realistically speaking, is we could do high-speed rails across our country. That is absolutely doable. Something that I don't know how we haven't fucking done yet, right? That's something we can actually do. Unfortunately, a lot of cities have been built around automobiles. Like there are, like it's not like fucking irrecoverable, whatever. I can't think of that word. Irrevocable. Um, we can change cities, like Houston, for example, I don't know how familiar you are with this topic, but like Houston's one people always bring up about just like sprawl, essentially. It's just so much like area, and it's just like so much wasted area, essentially. Like you can start to like scale that back, but that just takes a lot of taxes on infrastructure that people
Yeah,
like to bitch about.
yeah, that's a good. Yeah, because it's like, I mean, that is the tough part of it too, is that everything is set. Like it's already like fixed. It's sunk cost basically. We already built the L in Chicago and all the
It's
highways.
already there. It's like
It's already
right.
there. Like it's gonna cost us money to get rid of it, and then we won't have it. And meanwhile, it's making us money to keep it. So it's like no one's gonna do that. Although, if we continue to go on and not do that, then eventually we will have a bunch of outdated cities. You know,
Uh-huh.
there has to be some type of continued improvement. But with infrastructure like that, it is tough because it's like it takes that long to even build the highway or the road. And, by the time you're done building it, it's like, it's going to be a while before you make a return on that investment. And by then it's far outdated. So there's just there's no good like financial incentive to do it.
And is that all an education problem?
I mean, everything could be an education problem in a way. I mean, you know,
I'd laugh a little bit because we were talking about infrastructure instead of education there. But realistically, again, like, what if our education was completely different and people were incentivized to think about how to build the best city, right?
that's exactly right. Yes. And it's literally right now when they teach stuff like this, and I know I've seen it, that they'll teach this is how you build a city. Look at this city, see how we built it. That's how you build it. They teach it that way, but what they should be like the test shouldn't be, how did we
How
build this
was this
city?
designed?
Right. The test should be how would you have done it different that would have been better? Like if that was always the test, then that's valuable. That's critical thinking, and that's something that I think I'm not gonna even hate on the generations younger than us because I don't think we're very good at it either. But I think the generations continue to get worse and worse because we rely more on technology. But with ChatGPT, it's like if you can use it as like a tool for critical thinking, we can see a productivity increase like crazy and an efficiency increase like crazy because now all that matters is coming up with the right questions, so it's like
Right.
you can ask a series of questions and come up with a better answer than anyone else ever has before.
It always comes down to questions, right? We're a goddamn philosophy podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's what education is, right? It's based on asking questions, asking good questions, and trying to come up with responses, and then seeing where that takes you. Instead of learning, this is how we built this city. It should be what would be the best way to make a city, right? Like
Hmm.
how would you design like transportation to get around this area, right? Like I
Right.
just
The
but
teacher should be there to tell you the teacher shouldn't be there to tell the students what we already know. The teacher should be there to like get the students to think about what we don't know yet and to think about it that way from a young age. Because I think that gets molded into people's minds at a young
it
age
does.
that it's like, people consider themselves smart if they memorize all of the things that they were taught. And if they struggle to memorize it all, then that's considered a failure. But realistically, it's like memorization means nothing anymore. And if at a young age, kids learn, like now adults know, okay, nobody knows everything. As a society, we don't know everything, and they're still figuring it out. We've seen technology keep getting more and more advanced, more and more innovation. So
And
we know that now.
we're seeing more and more just how stupid we are.
Right. And we know that now. But at the time when we were actually learning and trying to choose what we wanted to do with our life, we were basically told that, this is the way it is. And we like I at least that's how I felt. I remember thinking like this is the way it is. It wasn't until we started seeing like technology advancing where I started thinking like, oh, like this is going to keep happening. There's going to be more and more technology, and it's like people keep figuring out new stuff. I want to try to figure out something new, and it's like if I would have thought that at a young age, I think I might have chosen my career path differently, or maybe have been more passionate about what I was doing and paid attention instead of just trying to memorize everything before the test and then, just pass the class.
But so how do you structure it then? I was gonna ask, how do you quantify that, right? Because
Yeah.
right now grades do a really good job of quantifying things, right? How do you quantify who asked the best question?
Yeah. I mean, and especially if it were to be online too, and it's just data you're looking at, that's a tough one. But it could be, yeah, I mean, we'd have to brainstorm on it. There's
Well,
probably some
well,
good
well
ways of doing it.
so what is a sign of a good education? This is again, we're asking questions to it, right? We don't know. Asking that, I would say, understanding of the topic for sure, but then there's also an extrapolation factor,
Hmm.
right? Like taking whatever knowledge we currently have and then essentially turning it and saying like, why not, essentially, or like thinking of like a flip side of it, essentially.
Being able to kind of think critically and connect things that aren't necessarily, if you can come up with something that you didn't hear repeated from someone else, I think that's a sign that you're able to think critically about something. Whereas like, so rather than like the example I gave earlier, rather than what year did Christopher Columbus, discover or stumble upon the Americas, what about a question of something along the lines of the year was 1492 that Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the Americas. Why do you think it happened at that time as opposed to, a couple hundred years earlier, a couple hundred years later? And then you'd have to think, well, what was going on at the time? Oh, well, the scientific revolution had happened recently and people started discovering the earth might be round. And they also were developing a lot of navigational technology that allowed them to take longer voyages. And it's like stuff like that where it
Yeah.
added up and that happened to be, makes sense why it was at that time. But it's stuff like that where they'll never, so far at least, we don't see that asked much. We just see like, what year did that happen? What year did that happen?
Yeah, because it really has become institutionalized where you need that grading system, right?
Hmm.
Because that's
Yeah.
that's how you're kind of sorted, essentially.
Yeah. And
Like,
it's not useful though. It's not useful in the workplace, I don't think. If depending on what your job is, but like, I mean, if any job that's requiring thinking outside the box or creativity, it actually is probably harmful, because if you're just used to, like, I see a lot of people come in that, I was the same way, but like coming in straight out of college, I'm going in expecting someone to give me like a checklist of instructions to do. And instead I get handed like a packet of documents where I have to just kind of like figure it all out and kind of come up with my own way of doing it. And it's like I kind of just freeze up, like, oh, wait a minute, like, what do I do first? And no one's there to
uh,
tell you what to do first. You just gotta like kind of make it. It's like a puzzle. You got to put it together. I think that's where a lot of jobs are, and I think that's why a lot of people are coming out of school struggling a little bit.
yeah. So, but I mean, it's for the companies, right? The education. Like, if we made it good, right? Education, we focused on the questions rather than the answers. It would be really subjective up to like essentially the grader as to what constitutes a good score on like a question, right?
Well, I guess, I mean, that's one way to kind of get the incentives aligned would be like the company. So, like, who has an incentive? Like we talked about earlier, so that if you incentivize the teachers to pass the students, then they could just make the course easier to pass as many students. And then all of a sudden, everyone passes. You've got a problem. Who actually has a natural incentive to make it challenging and make it productive and actually like give the best quality classes possible and grade things fairly and accurately that might be somewhat subjective or not as easy to just quantify using multiple choice answers? What entity would actually have that incentive to do that would be the companies that are trying to then hire those students and bring them on. And, if you've got a big company like Facebook or
Isn't that
Google,
isn't that like what like happens though, essentially already?
I mean, it would be basically taking out the middleman, I guess, because I think it's the middleman that's screwing a lot of it up. You know, like if like right now they'll go down and they'll look at like the college curriculum, say, but they don't actually design the curriculum. They're just going off of the college's reputation and saying, "Oh, Harvard, that's a really tough college, and graduated from Harvard must be really smart, really capable person." Whereas, but Harvard is not incentivized to fail anyone or to, I mean, they're incentivized to keep their reputation as a prestigious school, but they're not, I mean,
So would you want companies doing like third grade education?
no, okay. So now if we think about, I mean, no, I don't think so because I mean, for the competition, yes, like I guess private schools, that's what that is. I don't know if I'd want like Google, getting a bunch of like third
Right,
grade classes and start getting them
right.
ready to start coding, but
Well, because what I was going to be building to there was like you're talking about like colleges becoming like the actual like, consumer in that or producer in that situation because they're also the consumer. Again, that sounds a little bit dystopian to me, like, and
I think college, I don't see it being dystopian for college, but for like K through 12 education, yeah.
college could absolutely make sense, to be honest, especially if you then like had some type of like cultural shift essentially.
I mean, think about how dystopian it sounds right now that colleges, I think it's much more dystopian what we have now. Colleges are also companies. No, they're also for-profit companies that basically use their accreditation to just kind of monopolize and jack up their prices, and they have an infinite amount of money coming in because the government's going to get back everyone who's giving loans, and they're just kind of running this big Ponzi scheme where meanwhile, like the value of their actually degree is going down. So it's like, I would rather have someone designing the classes who actually cares about the students rather than cares about the lenders who are paying them the money.
Mm-hmm. But then I don't know. Is the line drawn just at college? Then you would want that for like
Well, I wouldn't want it to
how would
be,
we change? How would we change then K through 12 essentially?
yeah, because with college, it's like you are entering into a business transaction. Like if you're paying for college, you're going there. You don't have to go, so it's not like it's a little different when you get to like yeah K through 12, where I mean it's like it's illegal to not go, isn't it? Or at least up until a certain point, up until like
Or
14 or something.
you
Like
can be
everyone has to go.
you can be homeschooled.
Yeah, I guess you could be homeschooled, but I mean it's like if it's if it's that age where it's kind of just standard, like schools are where you live, whether public schools, private schools, then I wouldn't want like a private company who is going to like train the kids up and recruit a bunch of young kids to then become, there to mold them to be good employees for them. But I mean, I don't know. That's a tough question. But I think, I mean, there's got to be some changes. Maybe just it's tough. I mean, that's part of the problem is that with the public schools, I don't see how it could happen
So
with government money. You know,
yeah, it's well
at least en masse.
K through 8, right? Could maybe be like decentralized in a sort of way, right? So one of the questions we kind of talked about, like a top down versus like bottom up approach. And there's a lot of issues, I think, with, damn, this could be pretty good, actually. Richard, here we go. So, like, young, like your K through 8, maybe whatever, like K through 12 is sort of like decentralized schools that that the companies aren't involved in, right? These are just schools based on like how to like create like the best like type of person essentially. Then after that, you go to like some type of like it would be like equivalent to college now, but based that curriculum is based on the company.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that seems ideal because assuming that, I mean, I'm sure, and that's the thing too is there doesn't have to only be one. The reason there's only one version now is because of this kind of like cronyist, like monopolistic system that the current traditional colleges have, and that's because this was established by like, look, who really decides whether the kid is going to college? Probably, in a lot of cases, the kid who just graduated high school, but in a lot of other cases, is like the parents of the kid. If the kid doesn't go to college, they might shame them for not going. And that's because they were the ones who were living in a time where this was the only option. But here we are now, where we're kind of in like this awakening period where everyone has access to all this information. And now there doesn't need to be just this. I mean, maybe traditional colleges stay around and you can go if you want, but if there's private competitors coming in, I think that's a good thing, competition. And if companies agree, oh, wait, these private competitors are teaching better and producing better employees than the universities are, then we want to start hiring like, all right, there you go. Now we've got a competition. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's definitely where we're heading.
Competition's always a good thing for sure, right? One of the issues to like top down education is that whoever fucking controls the top gets to control the minds of the entire nation, essentially, right? So if you don't allow just the government to control education, you allow like other people to control education, then it doesn't have to be this one set type of structure of like everyone knows different classes every single day and blah 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 K through 8.
Yeah, the K-8 part is too. I mean, I know they did remote learning for a while, and I feel like that is definitely the time where online might not be the best option because that's when kids are becoming socialized. Like if K-8 or K-12 was all just online, I feel like that might cause like a mental health crisis for a lot of people, a lot of kids growing up who, like don't get out and see their friends or meet friends, or they just sit in their rooms on their computers all day. That's probably not a great idea, but there might be some benefits to doing some things online where they can actually learn new stuff compared to what they could learn in a typical classroom. So that one I'm a little bit less certain about the K-12, but I'm feeling very confident that we're heading this way for colleges. I would like to think, at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. And if like competition could definitely work for K through 8, I think too. I mean, I think there is some kind of competition. We talked about like Montessori and other sorts of private institutions. I mean, me and you went to a private Catholic school, K through 8, right? So
Yeah, and I mean, part of the competition
there's
too
other
then is like
options.
local governments. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
well, the property, if we're all in a community and our public school is really good, then the property value goes up, and so then that kind of makes everyone in the community richer because the school is really good, and then that attracts better students, which would be better for my kid to network with because it kind of just like cycles up. Whereas if a solid quality education for elementary school in a community would attract more people to that community who value education, and it'll kind of just, it's like a, what do you call it? It's like a self-fulfilling cycle kind of, it just keeps building itself up. So I think that's really the incentive there, but then, it's hard to really pin down as to like how to set it up that way when it's public. It really just depends on where you live in that case, which that's a whole different problem.
And then ultimately, where education, I think, could lead and is, I mean, eventually, like knowledge could just be nearly instantaneous. Like essentially, like the Matrix, right? Like you download something.
Upload it in, yeah.
I know Kung Fu. Like downloads a little program in his head. 5 seconds later, he knows Kung Fu.
Yeah,
like
that's what Elon thinks. That's where Elon thinks it's going, at least.
we
With the Neuralink and all that.
we could be going there. I mean, is it so far fetched? Do you think that like we will be able to interface our consciousness with technology?
I mean, they've already done it with like monkeys and stuff, and then they did it with that one guy. Did you see that one guy on Joe Rogan? He was on there like a while. It was a couple months ago, but they hooked him up with Neuralink, and I can't remember. Might botch the details, but I thought he was like paralyzed. But then they hooked him up with Neuralink, and he was able to like move again. And I know they're starting off with just like curing paralysis and kind of like physical things like that. But I mean, even that is just an amazing first step. If they put Neuralink in a human and gave him the ability to, or maybe he was blind and then he was able to see again or something like that. Something crazy like that.
Yeah, that's insane. Can he download information like the Matrix?
I don't know if he can yet. I think they're still on
or is his just like some nice like physical?
I think it's just like it like reconnected his nervous system so that he can now move again or whatever it was. I can't remember. But according to Elon and all his kind of type of guys, they're saying that it's not extremely far off where we will be able to like just kind of, rather than getting a screen up in a camera and doing this, like I could just kind of telepathically be like, yeah, I want to like let camels know that I'm thinking
Yeah,
this, and then it would kind of communicate telepathically almost. They're saying that's
like
in our lifetimes. I don't know if
like
that's the
like
case,
that would
but
be pretty awesome if we could do that. But like, dude, the first like initial phases of that are just gonna be so insane.
just chaos. I mean, at that
Like
point, we're
I
no longer even human beings. Like, we have evolved into something else if we could do that.
society like can you give that to everyone? Like, do you give that to everyone? Like do you think people would like just hoard it for themselves? Like you think like it becomes a thing and then like we just have some like god kings?
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, if you did have that, why would you give it to everyone?
Yeah,
Like
right.
why would you put it up for sale? It's like you could just rule the world. But yeah, I think it's pretty good discussion. So we wrap it up here. Maybe next episode get into the philosophy of telepathic technology, something like that.
It's a hectic technology, yeah. We'll see about that. I think this was a pretty good episode. A lot to go through with that one. I mean, I don't know. It's and then it just becomes becomes cultural essentially. In the end, like we have to want our education to change in order for it to change because the bureaucratic process that is our education system, it isn't gonna fucking change itself.
Yeah,
Like we
no, of
said,
course not.
like
Yeah,
we talked about that infrastructure of cities. It's like, oh, the car, it's already built around the car. Like it's the same way America. Like, oh, our education system already makes people pretty good workers. Like why would we like change it? I don't know. So
yeah. No,
it
I
then
mean,
becomes cultural where you gotta fucking demand it changes essentially, or change it your fucking self.
yeah, and I think at the end of the day, that is what it is. It's what the people decide what the system should be, because without the people cooperating in the system, it doesn't work. I think and it's kind of it's a paradox because I think the problem is, and this is why I think the education system is the most important one, is because that is the root of the problem. Whereas there is not a bunch of people out there who are saying, yes, I have weighed out all of the options of what things could be, and I actually think that the current system we have, where I take out $100,000 loan and then I get a degree, I spend the rest of my life paying it back if I can, or I default and have terrible credit. And meanwhile, then I'm going to have to help my kids pay for theirs, or they're going to have to take out an even higher loan, and we're just going to keep doing this Ponzi scheme. There is not people who are out there thinking that, yeah, that's the best option that's available, but they're just not thinking at all about what the other available options are. They're just accepting it that this is the way it is. That's how I was taught it was. That's how, and it's like that's the
It's
problem right
it's
there.
it's pretty
They're not critical thinking. If they were, the
it's
people
pretty
would hate
fucking
this.
hard. It's pretty fucking hard to imagine a new system.
I know. That's the thing, is that it's like it's fed to us as if it's the way it has to be. But if we kind of take a step outside the box and start thinking about different ways, and if everyone were a little bit more open minded, then we as the people would have much more say, and we could easily fix. I think I shouldn't say easily, but feasibly fix a lot
There
of
you
these
go.
issues.
There you go. Feasibly, not easily. But
Yeah.
yeah, pretty good episode. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Catch you next time.